second Saturday Artist Talk. Oh, we're waiting for video for a second. Okay, I'm going to do one more clap. Thank you guys all for being here. Welcome to the second Saturday Artist Talk. This is, I think, maybe the largest one we've ever done. I'm really excited to kind of do this. This is our 6th video open call. I think this is only the 2nd or 3rd time we did a artist talk for one of these, because it's usually kind of so difficult to get everybody together. Sometimes it's very international. Sometimes we luck out and everybody's local, or people are willing to travel and make something really great happen. So, the second Saturday Artist Talk is a chat that we host. It was originally developed with the Oakland Armorer, which is a local organization that kind of promotes arts from all kinds of places throughout the Oakland area. And we developed this as a way to kind of lend legacy and lend a little bit of perspective to the work. Usually it's a one-on-one. Most of what Aggregate does here is solo exhibitions. But this video open call, which we've done for the last 6 years, it's one of my absolute favorite shows to put together. It's the one that I care the most about still. And I'll talk a little bit about the process, about how we put this show together. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about video work and how your work coincides. Hopefully you all got a chance to see some of each other's work and got to see how it all pieces together. I'm gonna just do one more check on audio. Hopefully Willis will give me a notification if we're too quiet or too loud. That's Willis, co-founder of Aggregate Space Gallery, floating around taking pictures. Shaggy, our programs and communication manager here, and Shanna, our all things physical and digital person. And I will try to go around and do my best. I've met all of you less than 10 minutes ago. So I think we'll start on my furthest left. We have Salvaggio Dorgetti. Yeah. Is that good? Yeah. Excellent. And you have the piece in the theater, which is wonderful for everybody that hasn't quite seen it yet. Again, at the end of this, we will strike the chairs and turn the lighting back to normal so it's not washing out the work, and turn all the audio back on. So you're welcome to stay. We're open until 5. You're welcome to go get some lunch and come back and just hang out. So, okay, so Salvaggio. Rachel Cole with my favorite Questions for a Dinosaur piece that infects the whole rest of this show with a positive attitude. A lot of this work is pretty dark. I think you're Ciro, right? Valerie, right? That's right. You have your back to your piece. I'm sorry, Valerie. My hands are medicine, which is the piece that's right behind. Sorry, it's with a mute mark on it, slowly saddening it for the duration of the talk. And then live from Skype here we have Beata Ristatan. Is that close?
The other VOC6, I'm very close.
Oh, excellent. And where are you Skyping from?
I am in Toronto right now. It's very, very cold and very snowy.
Oh, excellent. Here we just got over a heavy rain instance, but for the rest of for the most part, it's a beautiful day. Sorry to brag. So Beata's piece is the Intimacy Project, which is right here over our right shoulders. Then Ciro, right? Yes.
I'm Ciro.
With the dual channel depression piece, which is absolutely spectacular.
That's what you got.
That's what I'll talk a little bit about how we kind of go through this, and I'll preface it with that, not to talk too much, but then to let you guys have the form. Abe, you have the piece upstairs, which is performance video, and I'll ask you more questions about that. But thank you for participating. And Emma.
Yes.
Panaz Eisner.
Hello.
With Beth's 3 o'clock. That's not the full title, but that's what
Beth's 3 o'clock with Dr. Harlow.
With Dr. Harlow. Oh, wonderful piece. Thank you. But we'll turn it back on to you. So the way we do this, the way we curate this show, curate is not a word I like to use at Aggregate Space. We consider ourselves facilitators, people that kind of help artwork kind of excel at what it is, and also kind of excel in this odd space that we are renting here in Oakland. This show was an emergency. Really, I wrote about this just recently in the book, which is why it's so kind of clear in my mind, that we thought we were closed after 2 years, and we got this little grant from Alternative Exposure, which is a grant given through Southern Exposure, which is a San Francisco nonprofit that gives small grants to artist-run spaces. And we got this $5,000 grant, and we were like, oh, that's super great, well, we should hang on for another year and figure it out. And so we had no show like 5 weeks from that day. And we were like, let's do an open call for video. We know a ton of people that are making video work. And we won't do a theme. And we'll just see what we get and try to curate a themed show out of that. And that first year, we got 35 applicants, something like that. We curated 6 of them, and we called the show Full Frame because all the work that we got was like in some way using like the entire frame of the camera. So it was more of a kind of an aesthetic theme that year. The next year we decided to do it. It ended up being this show called Cringe, and all the work was kind of comic-based self-portraiture by artists kind of doing either comical or embarrassing things, kind of to some degree. It was all, you know, I think everything in that piece, that work was self-portrait. I think that year we had 80 applicants. So we decided to put a dollar amount to the call to try to slow down having to watch 80 videos, which at first was $10, and I think we had like 60 that year, and then the following year was like 100, and then this year we had 200 applicants. And we watched all of them, and I think 5 of us this year watched all of them. And really what we do is we watch all the videos blind. We don't know who they came from. All we have is a spreadsheet that has the link and the password, if there's a password, and then a notes column. And then we rate them on a 1 to 10 just based on like integrity, and essentially like, is this work something that was made for the purpose of kind of affecting a viewer and kind of having a viewer be active in the process of participating in the work. And we don't let each other see what we're rating each other. We do it as fast as we could. This year, usually it takes about a week. This year it was like about 2.5 weeks before we all got through them. And kind of what we found was this bit of sad poetry of work that was about, taking, being fearful but also brave amongst that fear and taking leaps. And a lot of it, again, is done through comedy. A lot of it is done kind of poignantly with very direct representations. And I'm really happy to have all of you here. I hope that gives you some kind of insight into this, but you guys all made really wonderful work. It's great to have you all here. Cool. Okay, so that's the longest intro I think I've ever done with the orange juice in my head. I guess I'm first going to just kind of talk through, impetus for working in video, and I really don't have any interest in which direction you take that. I'm more interested in what does it mean that this work that you made was video? And I'm going to start with A because I kind of have a precursor question, because I don't know if that piece of work, if I'm looking at documentation of a performance or if it was made for the video.
Yeah, so it's totally made for video.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I mean it reads that way, but I was unsure, because it is such a beautifully poetic piece, and I just wondered, is it...
Yeah, I mean, I always joke with people because if anyone came into the set
mm-hmm.
and they looked at how they were structured, they'd go, what is going on? It's completely not coherent in a live setting.
Oh, of course.
So, when I started, my background is in dance, and so when I started in choreography, I grew up performing in films,
mm-hmm.
and so I was always interested in the relationship between the body and the camera. And I thought that there was a place for dance vocabulary to be developed that could only be understood through the screen.
Uh-huh.
And so, so in this case, you're not showing below the waist.
Right.
So you need to be really, really close, close and wide.
Right.
It's about creating a language that has the perspective of the camera
mm-hmm.
that gives it meaning.
Right.
So that it wouldn't exist otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. So I've always sort of slowly developed a language that related to the camera. Yeah.
Cool. I think I'm going to just do forced follow-ups. I think, and I'm going to continue to refer to my sheet. I very much apologize. I think by the end of this, I'll know all of you very, very well. But I think, you know, Emma, you're working in a digital reality for a large part of what you're working on, and kind of working live action elements into it and back and forth. I mean, how did you come to that conclusion for that piece, or were you kind of working in the medium first, and then this piece kind of grew out?
Okay, so for most of my work, I do have an integration between live action and animation because I feel my background is really more in animation. Like, I did animation before I did live action, and so I think in an extremely organized and intentional way when I structure my films. So I plan everything out to a degree where it's really easy for me to then make certain parts of it live action and certain parts of it animation, because it's not like I film things and then cut them together afterwards. I plan the things and then I film them.
Right.
So for this particular work, I wanted to use animation to create sort of a contrast between the internal landscape of the character's psychology and the external landscape of her and her analysis appointment, basically, just to be very literal about it. And so I created everything in a way that's kind of unreal seeming, but the parts that are animation are stop motion animation, basically, with various different things that I put together, right? And then the live action part of the set that I built in my basement, that was very painstaking to edit out the backgrounds and make it black, but anyway, I definitely, this is usually how I approach my films, because I usually approach them from the mindset of what medium works for the particular part of the film to convey the idea in that section that I'm trying to convey. So I did kind of have that idea at first, because that's just kind of how I approach video in general, but the idea for this film existed before I decided to specifically use those objects to animate and specifically do live action and animation in those areas.
Yeah, so many of you are familiar with the history of video work, and one of the things that drew my eye to this work was that it was highly, almost everything kind of fits in this category with a few exceptions. It existed in this world of kind of like the second iteration of video work. Like the first iteration of video work in the 60s was kind of just recording surroundings with a portopack. And like that second iteration, when people really started to take advantage of it, was speaking directly to the camera. So like Martha Rossler, Vito Conci, Bruce Nauman, you know, people that were doing work performances that were designed to speak directly to the viewer. And the large majority of this work kind of exists in that world where either you as the artist, some of you in your own pieces are speaking either to a person that does not exist, like a dinosaur, or directly to the audience in the form of kind of encapsulating and bringing us in, or you're speaking to a person that's not there, or kind of having some other kind of emotional conversation with somebody that's not there. And I think what's startling is that all of this work is so very well planned and created. It wasn't a one-off. This wasn't none of this was a first try. This is all something that you guys worked through and shot and edited and treated like film, which again is not the rule in video work. Often video work is kind of things that kind of roll out either rather quickly or is a representative of a small performance. So to see work that is kind of film-based but also speaking through the language of video, kind of tackling like a more complicated subject matters and more vague, it makes me, again, it's really, really tremendous. So I think the best, I guess we could talk to Beata about that with the Intimacy Project, and maybe talk a little bit about how you conceived of what, what that means to you to have the viewer be an active participant in what your project is.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? It's a bit muffled on my end, but...
You sound crystal clear.
Okay, that's great. So I think for me, this project came about years ago. It was going to be a live performance piece with slightly different levels and iterations, and it would have been with strangers. And for whatever reason, for so many reasons, it didn't happen in that way. And years later, it still held me and spoke to me, the idea. And I decided to do it with video because that was something I had a lot of control over. I could do it right away. But I also, there's that thing about video, that like sort of immediate, immersive engagement that's possible with video. But also choosing to do it now, have the camera person be somebody who I know well and trust, moving away from that performative idea with total strangers, kind of speaks to where maybe I am personally in my art practice, wanting to do things that are a little more, I don't know, where I needed there to already be existing trust in order to make this video, which is kind of interesting. And also, it was really profound to see photos of people watching it from the gallery in California, not really knowing how they were reading it and how they were engaging with it specifically. It was a very profound experience.
Oh.
And the video piece that just travel around.
Yeah.
In the end.
That's really fantastic. I think there's something, so like when I teach video, I always tell students, like, video isn't film. You don't have a captive audience. It's an active medium, so you're stuck with having to make something that's good for any 1 second in the whole thing. It has to speak in some way. But then it also has to speak from the middle. Like, you don't have control over when somebody enters your piece or leaves your piece. So I think it's funny for me to think about the intimacy project and people that, maybe only set aside 40 minutes to come to this exhibition and maybe only watched the very beginning or only watched the very end, because it's a piece with a very linear plot that escalates and in the end becomes, currently where the end is what's appearing disturbingly, but but the piece, like, if you only pass through it, you may catch something that's just amusing rather than kind of the dark place where it ends up. So I think that's what I really respond to it, because I love the idea of somebody missing it and then their friend telling them how incredible it was, and then maybe being like, oh, I thought it was pretty funny that from it. Your piece, you also kind of did a self-performance that is kind of heavily narrated, heavily plotted, but is yourself. Is that true?
Yeah. I think it started with I didn't have I didn't know what to tackle in the film at first, and I just knew I had to break this barrier between like making the work and being in the work, and then with the current situation, as I'm Brazilian, and the current situation with the government and this threat coming from this now newly elected president, the frustration was building, and I just couldn't sit down and not do anything. And I started, researching more and more about the situation and realizing parallels within history. And that's when I found what I wanted to tackle is how similar the behavior was being repeated from 1964 and 2018. Like, it was exactly the same thing, but some people were just like not realizing. And also considering that I am making this film in the United States, the narrative of like telling the history became a big part of it for me as well, so that people that are watching it can understand where I'm coming from and what this whole thing is all about. I think it's interesting because there's this frat, the communist frat, that has been in Brazil for so long, and it's been always said from like the middle and upper classes that Brazil is going to become communism, when communism never existed in Brazil. And you can find photos of people with signs saying that Brazil is going to become Cuba from 1960s, and you can find ones from 2018, and it's like, Brazil's not Cuba yet.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Yeah. Where is that coming from? I mean, I think, so just like from our perspective, as you can see, this space is, there's the work that's in this room, and then there's this opportunity to create outliers to what the exhibition is, and to kind of allow, like the work in this room has a lot of direct communication. You're sometimes listening to sound from two pieces at once, or you're kind of seeing two things at once, or something's happening in the corner of your eye, and we're kind of very aware of how to manipulate, let that manipulate. Like, for example, Rachel's piece, the color bleeds over everything. And it's not something that we can control, but it was something that we kind of took advantage of because it allows there to be a kind of a click to the exhibition as you kind of switch from scene to scene. But your piece, for example, was something that we really felt strongly about putting in the theater, which is this the one active or the one passive space we have, where you take a seat and you participate. And your piece has a kind of a very significant weight, and something that we wanted to. I kind of always considered the theater being the last place somebody visits when they're here. Yeah. And so it's this thing that, they can be in this room and experience all these things together and kind of find a path forward through that in an order, and then end up in that theater and then kind of have to deal with the weight of what you're talking about, kind of in that kind of slow operatic kind of narrative. And then they have to come back and experience all the rest of this again with that on their shoulders. And so it's like we're using the kind of a way to manipulate people as to maybe the sadness, the darkness in some of this other work that maybe they didn't notice the first time. So thank you for that. So I guess we'll just go on to Rachel, because you also are kind of speaking on a kind of more of a political, environmental level. I mean, you've spoken about this work being a part of a series of talks, and kind of you do performances concurrently with this work, or do you replicate the work?
Yeah, I'm developing some more live performance with this work. I come from a theater background, and sort of over the past 12 years, my work has kind of become more and more less about live performance and more about video, and that is kind of making me sad now, and so I'm trying to go back and expand and do more live work. Right.
Well, I mean, I think there's something to, thanks for that answer. There's something about I recall watching, a lot of these videos I was watching at midnight with headphones on, just one after the other, and we picked 10 out of 200. And these were really good, and there was a lot of other really good ones, but there's also a lot of stuff that's, not great, but you have to watch a lot of it to make sure that it's not, that you're not making a poor choice, So to come across something that's so fast and funny and multi-layered, which I think is a safe thing to say about what you're doing, because it reads I feel like the immediate read is comedy. You're choosing these bright colors, you're choosing this very kind of quippy thing. Your costumes are all a little ridiculous. All the framing is a little cartoonish, and then you're going sneaking in these really heart-stopping, terrible thoughts about our current society that are. Without sound, it doesn't come across. It would never come across. But when you know what the questions are, if you were to read the script instead of seeing the film, you would never find it funny. Yeah. So it's you're disarming the audience in a way that's very particular. And I think, again, we're trying to use that as an effect to kind of do the same thing with the rest of the exhibition. And I think it speaks significantly with Emma's work, but also with Michael, who didn't make it today, kind of through kind of overt comedy. And most special thanks to the dinosaur.
She didn't want to be named, so that's
yeah. Anyway, so I guess we could jump to the piece that you kind of, Rachel, most seriously affects, which is this kind of we curated a series on us at the moment, so we'll kill them and it'll kind of come back up. Thank you so much for being here. And I know that you would have preferred it to be on dual channel. I apologize that we didn't kind of have the overage of equipment to make that happen for you. But it is a really, really stunning piece, and the pacing is really, really stunning. And we felt like we needed to give it as much space as possible, but also your audio spills over the entirety of the space, kind of as this. You kind of have this. There's a fan hum, and then there's a few kind of other really specific sound cues that kind of alert people in the space that something else is going on. So it afforded us this opportunity to create something that's always there, but maybe never there, depending on how they want to participate. But it's also the most intimate space out here. So I thank you again for kind of allowing us this choice, which I know probably was not your first choice. So thank you very much. So talk a little bit about the piece and kind of how it came together and what you were thinking about.
So it all came up very simple idea. I have this image in my head, was just this woman smiling at me for a very, very long time. And it's almost unbearable to watch. So that's the time I got very curious about, like, what is she smiling at? Why is she smiling? So I got very curious. That's the actual intention of my, and what space she's living in, what she's going through. So we kind of create the space and the piece together with the performer.
Excellent.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
But we want to create a space that's very slow, almost like timeless. So most of the time, the camera. This one of the reasons I use video is like I'm very conscious about the camera, how far away it is from the performer, how close you are, because you affect them emotionally. So most of the time on the right channel, I'm very, very far away from her, and the camera never moves most of the time, and never give any direction during the take, and she would just be in her space for 20 minutes and just like doing her own thing. But yeah. Yeah,
and then the left channel is just the
left channel is more like I'm closer to her. So I and the camera are very close to her, and she's smiling while she's thinking all this backstory in her head.
I love diptych work, and I think this is a really, really strong piece where you're creating a constant series of comparisons between the two frames, and you allow again, it's like you're allowing the viewer to get lost in whichever one they feel that they want to get lost in, and then kind of having to gather themselves and figure out what's going on in the other frame periodically. And I think again the sound does a great deal to do that, because you kind of wonder where certain sounds are coming from if you're looking at the opposite screen, for example, or if you're kind of like you're using the dual channel medium in a very strong way. Saying very too much, like Donald Trump or something. So anyway, thank you. And then Valerie, yes. Okay. Your work. I have to, I guess, mention it. So it's your mother, right?
Yes, the first face that appears in the video is of my mother.
Which I just heard you mention before, but I didn't know that or assume it. So that puts a different spin on the whole thing. So can you talk a little bit about kind of how you conceived of it and how you talk about like the frame within the frame and kind of this idea of the close-up, and then your choice of how the choice of having the blank, how to describe the shots of your mother that are kind of empty frames except for her face speaking, and just talk a little bit about the work and where it comes from.
Yeah, so it's actually quite different from previous work that I've made. I would call a lot of my other video work somewhat fast-cutting, maybe actually a lot like my head before I ever shoot anything. But this work was part of a body of work that was much more freeform and organic, and the subject matter had to do with dealing with grief and loss, and in particular, in 2017, I lost a couple of people who were very close to me, one of which who was my father. And so I was dealing with, I kind of took a hiatus of being in the studio, and for many months was just shooting. Actually, the footage in this video, the hands and the face and the portraiture kind of footage, those were all things that I shot once I decided I could go back into the studio and work again. But all the other footage, like the natural world kind of footage, those are all things that I shot during that time period when I was kind of still, I guess, actively grieving, you could say. And yeah, so for me, I was really thinking about, like in death, the loss of a body, the physical loss of a body. And I was really inspired by ASMR, which I think might be, you could probably tell from the hands. And one of the reasons why I had a hard time falling asleep. And so for the first time I started watching ASMR videos to fall asleep, and it really struck me how amazing it was that there's this phenomenon that happens where there's a person behind the camera that you never meet, talking to an audience that they'll never know, and there's this almost virtual, haptic sensation that occurs. And so for me, I thought it was just this really beautiful idea that even in death, where there's a physical loss of body, there is a way to kind of capture virtual touch, and even if it doesn't go to maybe the person that you're grieving for, it can then be projected outward to an audience that maybe I'll never meet. And so for me, I thought that was kind of something that I was trying to capture. And the title of the piece is "My Hands Are Medicine." And again, that's also a phrase that I wanted to play off of, because that's actually a phrase that my mom would say to me often when I was very little. Where I was sick, I would sit next, which means, my hands are medicine. And so that's what she's saying at the beginning of the piece. And so there were all these just memories and thoughts that I was trying to encompass it into one body of work, but a soothing sensation or comforting experience for whoever might be watching it.
Yeah, I think there's choices that you've made that I think the piece roundly does that, but some of the choices, especially kind of in this other context, we kind of maybe distort your work a little bit. And I definitely kind of thinking about what Abe was doing with his piece by kind of creating this surreal, this movement that kind of transcends the actual action and creates something else, which I think is a lot of what the hands start to do and some of the hummingbird photography starts to do. I love that it's here. I love that you're here. Thanks.
Thank you.
So did we get? I managed to get through everybody once, right? So let's do a speed round. No, I'm just kidding. Why don't we talk a little bit about? I kind of want to get you guys to start talking to each other, and I don't know what the best way to do that is. Does anybody have any itching questions to ask? I know you all have been here for just a few minutes and saw some of the work, and now you've kind of heard everybody kind of talk a little bit about the work. Is there questions that you wonder about kind of how people put their piece together, or what their work was? I can change subjects and go in a different direction, but I just feel like it could get more interesting if we start to get excited about things in a different way. Okay, maybe that was the wrong course of action.
I'm curious about, Rachel, you mentioned that you're trying to expand your process to encompass more theater work again, or live performance. And since you obviously use costumes, and in particular, the dinosaur costume, that's pretty substantial, I'm wondering if the dinosaur is something that you've kept and plan to use again.
Yes, and I actually have a new project that I'm going to be doing shortly, actually, as a way to support the live performance piece of it. Is I'm going to be making these dinosaur portraits. I'm not playing the dinosaur in this video, but I'll be playing the dinosaur in the portraits, and it's just going to be some still photos. I think there's 104 questions in this piece, the number that I use to talk about it, so I'll do 104 separate portraits with different backgrounds, not the kind of backgrounds there, but different kind of drop cloths, and a few different costumes, and I'm interested in how the dinosaur can sort of embody slightly different performances, and then on the prints write one of the questions for each print. So the work, instead of sort of being in this video form, will then be iterated onto something still, and then I'll do a performance of this work with somebody else playing the dinosaur. But this was the biggest thing. This dinosaur head, I didn't think that I'd be able to make that. So it was that's the biggest thing that I've had done up to that point.
I'd love to kind of go back to Beata and talk about. Can you hear me? Oh, I would just, so now that you've made it as a video piece, and you talked about this in your first pass, do you consider doing a variation ever in performance? Or are you just kind of very content with the result of what the video does?
So I'm definitely continuing this as a video series. I'm shooting another one in February called Intimacy in the Wintertime. Whatever that.
That's a great sequel title.
Yeah. And I definitely want a whole bunch of these as videos. I really like sending them out there, I guess, as video. That's like really profound for me. But I do have some plans for performance aspects. I just don't really know. I think before, when I thought of this as a performative piece, it was maybe a little reckless, kind of recklessly conceived and a bit like exhibitionistic, and I think that was a long time ago that the original idea came around, and so I think I need to figure out how I really want to engage with people now, which is really different from how I wanted to engage with people even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So, yeah, definitely it's not done. I think intimacy is really like all my work is about that. It's like knowing someone and wanting them to know me, and I think that like the idea of intimacy for me grows into maybe something I hope a little more mature as I kind of think about it more over the years. So we'll see where it goes.
That's cool. That's very thoughtful. Thank you. So working with performers, so is that performer that you kind of gushed about, is that somebody that you'd work with again?
Oh, definitely. I actually recommend her to a lot of people because I felt like it was very hard to be not conscious of camera.
Right.
Especially she's an actress background. And so when I did the audition with people, I found her very into her own world when she's performing for a very long time without me giving her any specific direction. So yeah, I'll definitely work with her again. She's also very sensitive. I think sometimes it could be a bad thing, but I think that's it's very sensitive to the environment because we actually reconstruct, this is my house, but we reconstruct the house to be almost a little bit surreal. Mm-hmm. The curtains will change the shades and different colors of the curtains, so the lights coming through is very almost magical. Mm-hmm. So she's very sensitive to her surroundings and stuff.
And yeah, the performance choices are so intriguing.
Yeah, she was very.
The more I think about it after you said that, is because you wonder. It introduces a whole lot of intrigue into what's exactly going on in this person's life.
Yeah.
I think that to hear you talk about kind of that's something that you were after was really, really wonderful.
Yeah, and it's funny. I wrote a very short, background of who she is. Mm-hmm. I didn't tell her. I give it to her, and she was like, "This is actually almost exactly who I am." And she just kind of being herself.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, how many sisters you have? Where you live in? What kind of It was very general.
Weird.
But then she's like, "Oh, that's who I am."
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I guess to continue the trend of talking about performers, Abe, the people that you worked with were people that you knew for a long time, that you knew could do this body work, that you kind of selected to do that?
Yes, some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them, and then it's like over the years, as I grew up in dance, there's some people I knew, so I just pulled them in. But for them, I was just thinking about what you were saying about consciousness of the camera.
Yeah.
One of the things that is a pleasure is to put dancers in a position where in the long run they can't see. Mm-hmm. So they have to work on their instinct and sort of basically on kind of choreographing the instinct. So the structure is set up in a way that they have a vocabulary that's accessible to them, but it's very limited vocabulary. But then they can make choices, and we can call out the dynamics. So they'll do a take with the backs, they'll do something could sort of, you stir the pot. Right. You get it going, and then you let people go, but they don't know what they look like. Right. And they have to feel the other person. It's almost like tango, you close your eyes and you feel the other person. And so
right. I feel like that you get a lot of honesty in the performance by doing
You do,
that.
and they get, and the more they do it, I like the repetitive takes because the more they do it, the more they feel like they can take risks.
Right.
And that's where the joy is. So
Yeah.
the people, they'll do, like I said, 90% of it doesn't even work,
Mm-hmm.
but you get the 10% that does, and then so you try to, when you catch something that works, like my DP always said, keep that camera on.
Yeah, right.
You know, and so we keep, and when they're exhausted and when they're tired, they lose consciousness, and then they do things you don't expect.
Right.
So then it's almost like that feeling of like the live performance in a way is just that feeling like you're seeing it for the first time. So I felt like when we're looking at the monitor, if those of us that are behind it are feeling like we're surprised,
Yeah.
then we're like, okay, maybe we're onto something there, and let's work that a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Is this your first time directing this way?
No. In this, yeah, in a sense, in the last piece that I did, the last day of the shoot, it was a 7-day shoot, and the last day of the shoot, we really let the camera and the dancers improvise a lot more.
Uh-huh.
And then when I was in the editing room, I realized
That was useless.
80% of the film came from that last day.
Oh wow.
Because, and then it hit me, and then I was like, okay, you sort of learn to let go a little bit. As long as the structure is tight and they don't have like 100 choices, but they have 5 choices,
right.
then they're in a position where they feel empowered. Like it's not like a free-for-all improv. It's based on, we've worked these moves for a long time, and you can just choose to do something, or you could choose not to, and have certain dancers be quiet while others. That was the fun of it, is to sort of feel like, if there were 4 layers of backs, maybe the first layer is kind of quiet and something crazy is going on in the back,
right.
so that you have this dynamics conversation. Yeah.
That's great. Wow. I'm looking for a segue in my brain. I think Emma, you think about things kind of in the opposite direction, right? So
Yeah.
you're extremely controlling of the content. Does that idea of kind of working in a way that finds more surprises intrigue you at all, or you want to stick to?
It's interesting because I have done things where I did it in a different order, but always there's a lot of planning that comes into it for me, because I feel like the intention of my work sort of comes from the conceptual end, and then I'm trying to express that visually, as opposed to sort of visually capturing something that organically evolves into a certain concept, So for me, it's just very much about having a certain idea and then figuring out how to convey it. That's just the direction in which I work. And even I've only made one film where I didn't storyboard it out before filming. And that film, the way I ended up doing it is I kind of knew what the concept was, and I took all of this footage and then I printed out screenshots of it and literally aligned it into a storyboard and then wrote notes all over it and then went and edited it. So basically, it was the same thing. It was just in a different order. So, it's interesting, definitely, and I think that it can be really good for certain kinds of films, but I think for the way that my work is, it would not come out right if I did it that way. But I don't think your work would come out right if you started storyboarding it all out. Really stressed and tight and not right,
I think it's like that.
It's just very dependent on the intention of the work and the way the artist is.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's also finding the balance of what you control and what you don't control.
Yeah.
And that balance sort of shifts based on what type of work you're doing.
Right.
Because there was so much planning and so much rehearsal in terms of just to get to the point where we could get something that would, like a structure that would work, and then you sort of knew, okay, the camera can only be in these types of places because we're not going to shoot below the waist, we're not going to get too far this way, not too far that way.
Yeah.
So, but then there's the opportunity to let go.
Yeah, right. So Rachel, just to kind of attack you with the same kind of question, do you feel like, coming from a theater background and kind of the improvisational nature of the way in which you're performing this piece, was it something that was very easy for you? Like, did you work with a full crew, or did you do this by yourself in a green screen room?
I shoot almost all of my videos in my apartment on a green screen, and my husband shoots almost all of them. We met because he shot my first movie, and we worked together for a while, and then we started dating. So he's like my primary collaborator.
Oh, excellent.
And it makes things very easy, although I'm in the process of finishing a video series right now where I shot and performed in and am editing every video, which is a much different kind of process because you just, I mean, I feel like actually a lot of you don't always work with somebody else to do the camera, but there's a way that when you don't have to communicate anything, even if I'm not that good at using a camera, nor do I enjoy it. But I enjoy not having to have a discussion around what I'm shooting and what I'm doing. So I can't remember what your question is. Oh, but nothing is improv, actually.
I like just the way in which you're performing things. I assume that the questions were kind of
and the performance comes really like naturally. I come from that world, so I feel like that's kind of my primary medium is like performance and writing. But it's interesting too. I mean, you're talking about this like way of, we're all sort of talking about the way that we're sort of thinking through the structure of video, and then you were asking me about the difference between if I was going to be doing performance and as I'm thinking about doing more performance. I'm thinking a lot right now about the ways that video work, and especially like performance video work, where people are performing in their videos, it's very, for the most part, can be really like cognitive and conceptual, and you're sort of, you can feel it in your body, but you're also like thinking through it in your brain. And then there's a way that when you're experiencing performance or when you're creating a live performance, you're sort of like thinking through your body and you're transmitting the language through your body, and people are like taking that language from the body, which is something that I've been thinking a lot about, and how the same performance in video and live gets translated through different kind of language. So I don't know if other people are thinking about that, who are doing performance-based video, or what you're thinking about. Maybe also Abe is a dancer, but everybody else.
I haven't been thinking about live performance per se. I've been thinking about other projects, because for me it's just, I had some theater background, but I stopped performing for a really long time, so now I'm just getting back to it. And what is interesting me the most is just performing in front of a camera and then creating a final piece out of it. So I haven't been thinking about how this question is, but maybe live performances in the future.
Sarah and Valerie, have you guys ever performed in your own work?
Well, actually, I mean, that's me there.
Oh, of course. I should have looked over.
This was actually the first time in my video work that I used someone else on camera. So that was actually first working with my mom. But I primarily perform in my own videos, in part because of the same, I guess, ease of creating that you were talking about, being able to control your own camera. It's like the same way. It's not that I necessarily need to be in this particular video. I thought it was important for me to be the one performing, but in some of my other videos, it's not necessarily conceptually important. It's just that it's so much easier for me to just do it when I like kind of know what I want to be done versus trying to explain to someone else. And sometimes, sometimes it's just late at night and like I want to shoot this thing right now, and I just get it done.
I agree with the idea. Like, I have the idea, I know exactly what I want, so I might as well just do it myself instead of trying to find someone and trying to get this person into this character and then maybe not having the result I expected. And then just, I have the camera, I know how to do it, just let it roll.
And I think that actually is something that's that's very specific to video too, having that immediate playback
Right.
something that you can do versus, you know, traditional film and cinema where you'd have to get something, you know, developed
Right.
and then, you know, have I mean, it just makes it so much more instant, right?
Thanks.
For me, it's different because I came from a cinematography background. I don't like being in front of camera in general. And I think that's kind of seen through my work. I love observing people. So I want behind it. I want to see other people than myself. So that was just, so I never done performance. I've done performance when back in school was, you know, was kind of just exploring my vulnerability and stuff. But I don't feel very comfortable performing myself. Yeah.
And Emma,
I use people as props in my work. I don't really use them as performers. Like, I don't mean it as an insult. It's just true, you know. I use them as part of the composition of the image, basically. So, I mean, I only have worked with one person ever who's actually an actor, and that's my friend who, because I've done acting because I enjoy it and I think it's fun. I have one friend who's a really talented actor who's done some voice stuff for some of my films, but other than that, almost everyone in my films are just non-actors, people who I know who are willing to do it. The voice in this film is one of my parents' friends who's a professor. I'm sorry, no, he's a psychologist, but he has a really good speaking voice. So he is actually a psychologist.
that's funny.
Which is, yeah, hopefully this isn't the stand in his career. He's actually really nice. But anyway, and then everybody, all the hands in my film. See, that's the thing that I usually have in my films, like ears, hands, eyes, stuff like that.
Right.
So usually I just choose people who have nice hands or a nice ear or nice eyes or whatever, right? And in this film, Beth is actually just my mom because she was there in a wig and a dress that I got on Amazon. You know, Amazon's really confused now because I keep ordering really strange stuff like fake breasts and dresses and stuff. I think Amazon thinks I'm a cross-dresser or something now. But I don't know. But anyway, yeah, basically I just use who's on hand. If I have the best ear for a scene or something, I will use my ear in my film, you know?
Cool. Beata, we were just watching you dance around in your video. What do you work with other performers? Do you consider that as an option, or was this piece so specific to your path as investigating this intimacy, the intimacy project? Okay.
I was seeing something in all my. I mean, I think for me, like the thing that keeps coming up in my head is I hear people talk like for better or for worse, it has to be me, and I say for better or for worse because I think there's a lot I'm missing by not using other performers and just other people, forget performers per se, where for some reason I'm just like not ready to go there, I guess. Where even when it's like difficult, it has to be me, or even when I can't do it the best, then maybe somebody can do it better, it has to be me. It's like this weird thing where I have to show myself I can do these certain things to get into a certain state or communicate a certain thought or idea. I started taking an improv class to help with that a little bit, so which I think is why I was able to do the intimacy project in one take without a script. And it's like the only reason I was able to do that. But I think I see this sort of one day thing with maybe a lot of people or more people or other people involved. I think it's hard for me to like communicate this thought. I think to other people, or maybe I don't want to. I guess I'm not really sure how it is, but I think one day I will probably work with more people within the frame as opposed to like I have this camera operator. But I think within the frame, eventually there will be people. Maybe soon. Who knows?
Thanks. Thank you. So I'm going to just do a quick segue into announcing our next show. The next time we're going to host one of these. The next artist talk there's going to be two, which nobody knows about except you guys. So don't tell anybody. And anybody watching on YouTube, don't tell anybody. Layla Weaver's show, which is coming up, which is this really great creative work funded project that will be a diptych of videos in this space. We're going to build a wall in here. All the walls are going to be black. It's going to be very, very wonderful, super intense show, and the space will not be particularly conducive to hosting this. So the artist talk will be hosted at the lab, which is going to be on the March 8th at 6 p.m. We are still going to do a second Saturday artist talk, just a small secret one with only like 12 people maximum at it, and we'll figure out how to make that work. So you could definitely watch it on YouTube, but I'm not sure if we're going to turn people away or if we're just going to make them stand in places where they only can hear it and can't actually see us having a conversation, which might be weird, but I don't know. We're going to see what we do. So you should go to the lab on March 8th at 6 p.m. and join Layla Weaver, who... And do we know who's interviewing her? I know it's not me. I know I'm introducing it. I think she's in conversation with, you don't know. Nobody remembers. All right, well, sorry, Layla, I forget who you're chatting with. But I hope to see you guys again sometime soon, at the very least. If not that one, then maybe the following exhibition with Toria Cummings, which will be the second Saturday in April. I'm going to open this up to questions. If anybody from the audience has any questions for any of our video makers, or myself, or Shagig. Yes?
I guess I was curious about Valerie's choice of negative space and like the relationship between kind of like a painterly or maybe photography perspective compared to video, how you...
Yeah, so the black negative space is something that people have commented on, absolutely, and it is, I guess, a little bit different. In past videos, I often work with green screens, I guess, and put something in there. But with this, the black was really important. So, one, aesthetically, from a visual perspective, I really wanted there to be all the focus and attention on the hands, and then on the face, and I didn't want there to be anything else around that. But also, I wanted to kind of make a slight reference to, I guess, magic in this way of, like having something that, I don't know, if, like sleight of hand, I guess, almost. And so that was kind of another just small reference that I wanted to kind of throw in there.
It's a great pun.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say something that I found that there's a parallel between the way in which you were talking about how you address curation in this space, and that you kind of see it as a facilitation, and that there's kind of this that you and like you and your team in terms of curation, like you like kind of push the work into space, and that in the same way, I feel like in everyone's work, I think everyone is in one way or another kind of facilitating their vision with at least one other person. Whether they're even in front of the camera, like Valerie's, like she brought in her mother, and that might be the first time she's done that. But in your case, like you brought in an actress and you worked hands-on with her. And I think that in all of them, there's kind of a level of facilitation and collaboration to kind of let the work speak for itself. I think that's really, really interesting. And I had like a couple of things. One was for the intimacy project, when it was like stated that it not being a performance piece now, but it being a video, and like the strengths of that, I felt that there is strength in the fact that you acted with someone that you knew, because trust is so integral to the relationship of intimacy. Right. And I feel like that makes so much sense on kind of this hesitancy and kind of this redirection away from like interacting with strangers. And then I had a question for Rachel in response to this 104 like photo shots, because I was wondering, because like in that mode you're kind of taking another degree of separation, and like how that might aid your work, like how that's like kind of aiding the way in which you want to like discuss the work and put it out there.
I don't know actually, and I'm interested in like finding that out. That's a great question. But yeah, how is this thinking? I mean, all of the work that I've been doing over the past few years is around how do we develop a new or a productive language around how we are emotionally and psychologically experiencing climate change. So all of the work is I'm really trying to figure out how do we develop that language? So I'm not sure, but it's sort of another way that I'm trying to see how those questions become a conversation with people and how people will interact with a two-dimensional, sort of non-durational way of presenting the work.
I also like to question, like, not necessarily like, it's almost like rhetorical, but like the idea if you would want to be interacting, if you wouldn't have it as almost like welcoming someone else rather than the dinosaur, so that it's like a open conversation per se, you know what I mean? So that like there's more than just like your voice is voicing kind of a concern for our future, a concern of our existence. Because I was watching this and I couldn't help but like emotionally relate on all same levels. And I would just like think it'd be interesting in another way, since you're the person setting the attention, you're the person who's voicing all of these things, like how might hearing from others inform the work?
So inviting other people to ask the same questions, or inviting other people to ask different questions, their own questions?
Kind of their own questions?
Yeah.
How that might be generative, even if it was just more of a private space versus a public space in terms of an exhibition. If it was a private space and how that might inform the work. And like, just, that was more like food for thought rather than something to exactly response.
Yeah, and actually, just for your own, I am doing an oral history project that kind of came from this, where I am interviewing people. The questions are different. The questions are more based in reality, but they're around people's sensorial and experiential and emotional experiences with climate change. So from that, I've sort of been doing new work that is a little more sort of in conversation with what you are just thinking about.
I personally, I love the idea of exploring it, but the strength of this is, to me, asking horrible, unanswerable questions to a dead creature that is represented as like a goofy costume. You know, it's like, yeah. Well, I think it's just what makes it. Like everything about that choice is right, because who else do we have to ask these questions to other than a guy in a dinosaur costume?
Right. Somebody who's already lived through an extinction.
Right, which we obviously can't. You know, so it's like you're poking fun at like this horrific mystery. We're all stuck with these unanswerable questions.
Yeah.
So,
and I love that you say
so
poking
sad.
fun and like it's positive. For me, it's like it's really upsetting.
Oh yeah, totally.
But
totally.
it is. But like, I'm glad that that's not what the dominant energy is coming from it, because you've got to get away into it.
Yeah, right. Well, I personally always have a tendency to find humor fastest in video work. Like it's the first thing I get to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's my accessibility point. And I think, you know, even work that we've shown that is extremely aggressively sad, you know, I think it takes me longer to find that space and to enter the work and to be there. You know, I'm not sure why. I don't really have an answer to that. But the comedy, if I can crack a smile, I'll hang in there. Whereas if I'm like, this is confusing, I have trouble being patient enough to get the meat of the argument. So it's like when somebody can make an argument effectively under those circumstances, I'm a fan. And thank you for your kind of talking about facilitation. I feel like that is a really interesting and wonderful thing. I think with Aggregate Space Gallery, we always, you know, we're founded by like sculptors and filmmakers, people that kind of couldn't make, you know, like we couldn't make work on our own, or we were making work that was too big to fit anywhere or too dynamic to be shown well anywhere. And as all of you know, as video artists, showing video kind of sucks usually. You end up in the corner with a really like a 720 projector that's run off of a Skippy DVD player. You know, it's like you have to make all these concessions, and so it was always important to us to kind of create as much of a dynamic space that focuses on what video is, and to kind of try to have these multiple environments of you know, activity and passivity. And again, this show is about having video communicate like painting shows communicate, or like sculpture shows communicate, where the work is playing off of itself and off of each other, and connections are made, and all the work is elevated from that choice. So I feel like that's not a lot different than making work collaboratively. I feel like I'm collaborating with all of you, even though you had a relatively passive experience behind your computer, hitting send and paying us an awesome $15 that we're using to get everybody mimosas. I really respect all of you for kind of taking video to this other level of directorship, and especially those of you that came from cinematography backgrounds, working in this medium and showing work in a gallery setting. I think is hugely, hugely important, and it's something that's not enough people supporting, which is why we exist. So thank you guys. Does anybody else have any other questions, or that was kind of an okay way to wrap this up. That's an okay way to wrap this up. Thank you all for being here. So it'll be just 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll have all the sound back up, and you guys can check out all the work that you didn't quite see.
Where's your
Oh, just under the stairs.
Great.
Bye. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks so much for Skyping me in.
Yep. Bye. Ooh, that was long.